The human named Daniel stood in silence as the great doors of the alien palace opened. He had traveled far across the stars, captured by soldiers of a race he had never seen before. Now he was being pushed forward by tall guards with silver armor and glowing spears. His heart beat fast, but he lifted his head, refusing to look weak. The palace hall was huge, shining with strange light. Crystal towers rose high, and the floor reflected like water. Dozens of alien courtiers stood in rows, their eyes glowing faintly as they whispered among themselves. Daniel could feel their stares, cold and curious to them. He was nothing more than a strange creature brought from a distant world. At the end of the hall sat the throne, tall and carved from living stone that pulsed with faint energy. Upon it rested the alien princess, Solara. She was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like silver under starlight. Her long hair floated as if alive, and her eyes glowed like twin moons. Her beauty was sharp, almost frightening, a reminder that she belonged to a race far above him. The guards forced Daniel to kneel. He gritted his teeth, but he obeyed. The alien court fell silent as Solara's voice filled the hall, soft yet commanding, musical yet dangerous. "So this is the human," she said, her words flowing in perfect translation. "The one who dared to wander into my empire's borders," Daniel wanted to protest. To say he had not come here by choice, but he bit his tongue. He had learned quickly that one wrong word could cost him his life. The princess rose from her throne and stepped closer, her gown shimmering with strange light. She studied him as one might study an animal, her expression calm but curious. "Stand," she ordered, and Daniel forced himself to his feet. The courtiers gasped softly at her command. Few were allowed to rise before her. She circled him slowly, her eyes sharp, searching every detail. "You are smaller than I imagined," she said. "Yet your spirit feels—" Restless, Daniel stayed silent, unsure what answer would not anger her. At last, she stopped in front of him and smiled faintly. "You will serve me," she declared. "From this day forward, you are my personal servant." The words struck Daniel like a blow, but he did not flinch. To refuse was death. To obey was humiliation. He chose survival. The courtiers whispered louder now, their voices filled with scorn and laughter. A human, serving the princess, it was a joke to them, a game. Solara lifted her hand, and they grew silent at once. She turned her gaze back to Daniel, her eyes shining. "You will learn the customs of my people," she said. "You will learn how to please me, to amuse me, to obey me." Her tone hardened. "Fail, and you will be punished before this court." Daniel's fists clenched, but he kept his face calm. A storm burned inside him, but he would not let them see his fear. He bowed slightly, not in deep submission, but in a show of respect. It was the only way he knew to survive. The princess raised an eyebrow, as if amused by his stubborn dignity. Then she stepped closer, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "I will give you one chance," she whispered. "One chance to prove that your kind is not as weak as they say." The court fell silent, waiting. Daniel looked into her glowing eyes and felt the weight of her power pressing against him. He knew his life now balanced on every choice, every word, every step. The fate of a human among aliens rested on whether he could understand the heart of a princess from another world. Solara turned away, her silver gown trailing like light itself. "Take him to my chambers," she commanded. "Let him begin his lessons." The guards pulled Daniel forward, leading him through shining corridors deeper into the palace. He did not know what trials awaited him, but he felt the eyes of the princess watching even as she vanished from sight. In his heart, Daniel swore he would endure. He would not be broken. If he must serve, then he would learn. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would find a way to turn this fate into something more. But as the doors closed behind him, he heard the cold laughter of the courtiers echo through the halls, and he realized this was only the beginning of a dangerous game. Hook ending. The princess had given him one chance. One mistake and his life would end before the court. Daniel's journey to understand the will of an alien princess had begun, and the first lesson would come sooner than he imagined. Daniel was taken through long, glowing corridors. The walls of the palace seemed alive, shifting faintly like breathing crystal. The guards said nothing, their tall frames silent and cold as they escorted him to a vast chamber. When the heavy doors closed behind him, he found himself alone. The chamber was unlike anything he had seen before. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows. Strange floating lights drifted above, glowing softly like trapped stars. In the center stood a raised platform surrounded by curved pillars that hummed with energy. Alien symbols glowed on the floor, shifting and changing as if testing him. Daniel had no idea what he was supposed to do. Then the princess appeared, entering with calm grace. Her courtiers followed at a distance, whispering as always. Eager to watch his failure, Solara stood tall. Her silver eyes locked on him. "Your lessons begin now," she said. Her voice carrying through the chamber, a servant placed a tray before Daniel, filled with shining objects, bowls, cups, crystals, and orbs that pulsed with faint light. "Arrange them in proper order," Solara commanded. "This is the first task of a servant in my court." Daniel frowned, staring at the strange objects. There was no clear pattern, no marks, no clues. The courtiers laughed softly, already enjoying the show. He picked up a glowing orb and placed it in the center. But the symbols on the floor flickered red. A sharp hiss filled the air as the orb grew hot in his hands. He quickly dropped it back, his palm stinging. The princess tilted her head. Watching him without a word, Daniel took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. This was not just about copying others, he realized. It was about learning their way, reading hidden rules. Seeing beyond the surface, he observed carefully, noticing the faint hum each object made. The bowls vibrated low. The crystals sang high. The orbs pulsed with rhythm. It was like music, each with its own note. Slowly, he began arranging them by sound instead of sight. Low to high, heavy to light. The symbols on the floor shifted again. But this time they glowed green. The humming grew smoother, forming a gentle harmony. The courtiers fell silent, their surprise clear. Solara's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Interesting," she said softly. "The human listens." Daniel bowed slightly. Hiding his relief inside, his heart raced. He had guessed right. But he knew the next test would not be so easy. The princess stepped closer, her gown whispering against the crystal floor. "You see, human, my people do not measure skill by strength or speed alone," she said. "We value balance, harmony, the rhythm of the universe itself." Her eyes gleamed as she studied him. "Perhaps you are not as simple as they say," the courtiers murmured angrily. Unhappy that he had passed, one bold noble stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Princess, this is only luck. Nothing more. Humans are clumsy beasts, not worthy of your court." Solara raised her hand, silencing him with a single glance. "Luck is but the name given by fools to skill they do not understand," she replied. Her tone cold as ice, the noble stepped back, bowing. But his eyes burned with envy as he glared at Daniel. Solara turned her gaze back to the human. "You passed your first lesson," she said, "but many more remain." Her words were calm, but her smile carried challenge. It was as if she was daring him to try again, to risk failure in front of all. Daniel knew he could not relax. He had only survived one trial, and the court was eager to see him fall. But a strange feeling stirred in his chest. For the first time since arriving, he felt not just fear but also determination. If he could learn their ways, he might do more than survive. He might prove that humans were not weak. The princess clapped her hands softly, and the glowing objects vanished in a swirl of light. She stepped closer, so near he could see the silver sparks in her eyes. "You learn quickly, human," she whispered. "Do not disappoint me again." Her tone was half warning, half challenge. Daniel nodded. Meeting her gaze without flinching, he would not bow too low. Not surrender his spirit, he would serve. Yes, but in his own way, the courtiers looked uneasy, sensing something shift between princess and servant. Whispers spread through the hall. Was the human dangerous or was he useful? None could answer, not even Solara herself. As the princess turned away, Daniel's eyes caught the jealous noble watching him with burning hatred. He knew this was not just about pleasing Solara anymore. Enemies were forming in the shadows, waiting for his first mistake. Hook ending. Daniel had passed the first lesson, but the palace was no longer just a prison. It had become a battlefield of hidden games and silent wars. One wrong step could end his life, and someone in the court was already planning to make sure he failed the next test. The next morning, Daniel was summoned again. 2 guards led him into a garden inside the palace. It was not a normal garden. It glowed with strange colors. Trees with crystal leaves hummed. Flowers opened and closed like living eyes, and streams of silver water floated in the air instead of falling to the ground. Daniel could barely believe such a place existed. The Princess Solara was waiting, seated on a high chair made of living vines. Her courtiers stood around her, their faces curious and sharp. When Daniel entered, whispers filled the garden. The courtiers expected him to stumble, to fail. They wanted to see the human humiliated. Solara raised her hand and the whispers ended. Her silver eyes studied Daniel as if he were a puzzle she enjoyed solving. "Today you will learn more," she said, her voice calm yet dangerous. "You will face the customs of my people, tasks that even my own servants sometimes fail." A servant stepped forward carrying glowing orbs that floated above a tray. "These are the orbs of balance," Solara explained. "They must be arranged in the air to form the symbol of harmony." The servant let the orbs rise. And they began spinning slowly. They buzzed with energy, ready to react to any wrong touch. Daniel frowned. The orbs moved on their own, shifting and sliding like fish in water. When he tried to grab one, it slipped through his fingers and burned his skin. The courtiers laughed at his clumsy attempt, their voices cruel. "See? Human hands are too slow," one of them whispered loudly. Daniel ignored them, forcing himself to focus. He noticed the orbs pulsed like heartbeats. They slowed for a moment, then sped up again. He remembered the first lesson, rhythm and harmony. Maybe these orbs had a rhythm too. Closing his eyes, he listened carefully. He moved his hands not by chasing but by waiting at the right moment. He guided one orb into place, it glowed brighter. Humming in approval one by one, he caught them by rhythm instead of speed. At last, the symbol of harmony formed above him. Shining with green light, the courtiers fell silent. Shocked, Solara tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "You learn quickly," she said softly. "Quicker than I expected." Daniel bowed slightly, hiding the pain of his burned fingers. He had passed again, but the lessons did not end. Solara raised her hand and another test began. Musicians entered the garden, carrying alien instruments that looked like living creatures. They produced sounds Daniel had never heard, deep vibrations, high whistles, and voices that echoed inside his chest. "You will join their chant," Solara commanded. "If you sing wrongly, the harmony will break, and the court will laugh at your failure." Daniel froze. He had no idea how to sing in their language. The notes were sharp, bending in ways human voices were not made for. The courtiers smirked, waiting for his embarrassment. He listened carefully again. At first he could not follow, the sounds too alien. But he remembered Earth, songs by the fire, chants of soldiers, rhythms of work. He did not copy their notes exactly, but he found a simple human tune that matched the rhythm. He sang with steady voice, soft but firm. To his surprise, the alien instruments shifted to join him. The garden itself seemed to hum along. Even Solara's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected harmony. For the first time, some courtiers did not laugh. They listened, curious, unsettled. When the music ended, the silence was deep. Daniel stood breathing hard, waiting for her judgment. Solara slowly clapped her hands. "The sound like silver bells, very clever," she said. "You could not sing our song, so you taught us yours instead." Her courtiers looked uneasy. Whispering, some admired his boldness, others saw it as dangerous. Daniel felt a small spark of pride. He had survived again, not by strength, but by human creativity. Yet he also saw the glare of the rival noble from yesterday. The man's eyes burned with hatred, his lips curled into a cold smile. Daniel knew the noble would not stay silent for long. The princess stood, her gown glowing in the strange light of the garden. "You are different." "Human," she said softly, almost to herself. "Perhaps that is why I find you." "Interesting." Her words carried weight, and the courtiers heard them too. Their whispers grew louder, sharper, more dangerous. Daniel bowed again, but inside his thoughts raced. Every test was not only about serving the princess, it was also about surviving the court. For every success made Solara curious, but also made others hate him more. As the lesson ended, Solara turned to leave. Her voice floated back, soft but clear. "Tomorrow will bring harder trials, human. Be ready." Hook ending. Daniel had passed the strange customs of orbs and music, but he could feel the weight of many eyes on him. Some curious, some jealous, some filled with hidden threats, and as he left the garden, he realized the real danger might not be the princess's tests at all, but the enemies growing in the shadows of her court. The palace never truly slept. At night the walls glowed faintly, and the air hummed with energy. Daniel had little rest, his mind busy with the trials he had faced. Each task had been designed to break him, yet somehow he had endured. But he sensed that his true test had not yet begun. The next day came with a sharp sound. A horn echoed through the palace halls. Long and urgent, guards rushed past Daniel, their armor glowing with red light. The air was tense, filled with shouts in the alien tongue. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Daniel was pulled toward the throne hall. There he found Solara standing with calm eyes. Though her courtiers whispered nervously, the rival noble stood close, pretending loyalty, but his smirk showed secret delight. From the shadows, a roar shook the crystal pillars. The sound was deep, primal, filled with rage. The doors of the hall burst open, a massive beast charged inside, its body covered with black scales that shimmered like armor. Its 4 glowing eyes burned with hunger, and its claws tore grooves into the crystal floor. The courtiers screamed, scattering in panic. Guards raised their spears, but their hands shook with fear. Solara did not move. Her silver gown shimmered as she watched the beast with calm dignity. Yet Daniel saw the truth. She was trapped. The beast had entered too quickly, and she stood in its path. Without thinking, Daniel ran forward. His body acted before his mind could stop him. He grabbed a fallen spear from the trembling hands of a guard. The weapon was longer than any he had used before, glowing faintly with alien energy, but it was still a spear, and he knew how to use one. The beast roared and lunged. Daniel planted his feet and thrust the spear forward. The weapon struck its shoulder, bouncing off the thick scales. The impact sent pain through his arms, but he did not let go. He pushed harder, driving the beast back a step. The courtiers gasped in disbelief, a human standing against a monster when their own guards had frozen. The rival noble's smirk faded, replaced with unease. The beast swung its massive claws. Daniel ducked, the air ripping above his head. The force knocked him to the ground, but he rolled, grabbing the spear again. His chest burned with fear, but something stronger pushed him on. He could not let the princess fall, not here, not now. Solara's eyes widened as she watched him rise again. Blood on his cheek, hands shaking but unbroken. No one had dared move, yet the human still fought. The beast roared once more and charged. Daniel braced the spear, using its weight in his body like a shield. With a desperate shout, he drove it into the beast's throat. The weapon sparked, cutting through softer flesh beneath the scales. The beast shrieked, staggering back, its tail smashed against a pillar, shattering crystal into glowing dust. Guards finally found their courage. Rushing forward with spears and energy blades, together, they struck the wounded creature until it fell, its body crashing onto the hall floor with thunderous force. Silence followed, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. He stood leaning on the broken spear, his body trembling. Blood dripped from his arm where claws had grazed him. Yet his eyes remained steady, his head unbowed. Solara stepped down from her throne. Her silver hair floated softly around her, her expression unreadable. She stopped in front of Daniel, her gaze locked with his. "You risked your life without command," she said softly. Her voice carried through the silent hall. "No servant of mine has ever done such a thing." Daniel bowed slightly, though his body ached. "I could not stand still," he answered simply. Her eyes searched his face, glowing with strange light for a moment. The cold princess looked almost human. Almost moved, the courtiers whispered, confused and unsettled. Some looked at Daniel with respect, others with jealousy. The rival noble clenched his fists, his anger hidden behind a false smile. Solara leaned closer, her voice low, only for Daniel to hear. "Perhaps you are not useless after all," she whispered. Her words were not cruel this time, but thoughtful, curious. A spark of something unspoken passed between them. Daniel felt the weight of every eye in the hall. He had protected the princess, but at a cost. He was no longer just a servant. He was something more. And that made him dangerous in the eyes of the court. Hook ending. That night, as Daniel lay wounded but alive, he realized the truth. By saving the princess, he had earned her attention, but in doing so, he had also gained enemies far more dangerous than the beast he had slain. And one of those enemies was already plotting his downfall in the shadows of the palace. The palace was quieter after the beast attack, but whispers filled the halls like hidden snakes. Every servant, every courtier spoke of the human who had stood against the monster. Some admired his courage. Others feared what it meant, and one noble, the rival who hated Daniel, whispered poison into every ear he could find. Daniel himself rested in a small chamber. His arm was bandaged, his cheek still raw with scratches. The healers had used glowing crystals to close most wounds. But the deeper pain was not in his body. It was in the eyes that followed him. He knew many wanted him gone, and soon they would act. That night, As the moonlight from 2 alien moons streamed through the crystal walls, the door opened. It was the Princess Solara, stepping inside without guards. Her silver gown shimmered like flowing starlight. Daniel sat up quickly, unsure if he should bow or stand. "You should rest," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Your body is not healed yet." Daniel lowered his gaze. "I will heal," he said. "I have survived worse." She tilted her head, her eyes studying him with quiet curiosity. "You are different from the others here," she whispered. "They obey because they fear me. You obey. But you also resist." He did not answer, unsure if speaking the truth would anger her. But Solara stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Tell me about your world," she said suddenly. "What is Earth like?" Daniel hesitated. It had been long since he had spoken of home, but something in her eyes, curiosity, maybe even loneliness, pushed him to speak. He told her of forests that smelled of pine, of rivers that flowed freely instead of floating in the air. He spoke of firelight songs, of laughter under stars, of simple human warmth. Solara listened in silence, her gaze softening. "Your world sounds alive," she whispered, almost to herself. "My palace has beauty, but it is made of control, order, perfection. Nothing grows wild here for a moment." Daniel saw not the cold princess, but a young woman burdened with a crown too heavy. The thought unsettled him, yet also drew him closer. In the days that followed, Solara summoned him more often, not just for tasks or lessons, but to talk. She asked about human customs, why humans smiled, why they laughed even when life was hard. Daniel explained as best he could, though sometimes he simply showed her. He smiled at her one day when she made a sharp joke, and to his surprise, Solara almost smiled back. Whispers in the court grew louder, the human and the princess speaking in private, sharing words that no one else could hear. The rival noble's jealousy burned hotter with each passing day. He spread rumors that Daniel used tricks, that he bewitched the princess with human lies. But Solara ignored them, her interest in Daniel only growing stronger. One evening, she asked him to sing again, this time not in front of the court. But alone, he hesitated, then sang a soft earth song, a tune of longing and hope. The notes were simple, but his voice carried something raw and true. Solara closed her eyes as she listened, and when he finished, there was silence between them. But it was not an empty silence, it was filled with something unspoken. "Your song," she whispered at last. "They touch the heart. Even when the words are strange." Daniel bowed his head, but inside he felt something shift. The cold walls between them were beginning to crack. Yet danger grew in those cracks, for every time Solara chose to sit with Daniel, every time she spoke kindly to him, her courtiers grew more restless, and the rival noble sharpened his schemes like hidden knives. Daniel felt it too. He knew the court wanted him gone, but he also knew something else. He no longer thought only of survival. He found himself thinking of Solara, of her rare smile, of her voice when it softened, and that thought scared him more than the beast he had fought. One night, as Solara left his chamber after another secret talk, Daniel caught sight of a shadow in the hall, the rival noble watching, eyes gleaming with hatred. The noble turned and disappeared before Daniel could speak. Daniel's heart sank. He knew this was no accident. Trouble was coming, and soon. Hook ending. Daniel and Solara were building a fragile bond, a secret connection in a palace filled with enemies. But every bond comes with a cost, and as the rival noble planned in silence, Daniel realized the next test would not come from Solara. It would come from the shadows of the court, sharpened by jealousy and betrayal. The palace was alive with celebration. A grand ceremony filled the throne hall. Crystal lanterns floated in the air, glowing with colors of fire and water. Musicians played strange notes that echoed like thunder inside the tall walls. Every noble and servant stood present, their eyes shining with greed or pride. Daniel stood at the side. Near the steps of Solara's throne, he wore plain garments. But still the whispers followed him. Some called him the beast fighter, others the strange human who pleased the princess. The rival noble's eyes never left him. Filled with hidden hatred, the ceremony was meant to honor Solara. But Daniel felt a chill as the noble stepped forward. Bowing deeply, "Princess," the noble said, his voice smooth but sharp, "I must bring a matter of grave importance before your court." Solara raised an eyebrow, her silver eyes narrowing slightly. "Speak," she commanded, her voice calm. The noble lifted a glowing shard of crystal. Images shimmered above it. Twisting shapes of Daniel moving through the palace halls. The noble's voice rang out. This human has broken the honor of your house. He moves in secret places, whispers forbidden words, and seeks to bind you with tricks of his kind. Gasps filled the hall. Courtiers turned, their eyes wide. Daniel froze, his chest burning with anger and disbelief. The images were twisted illusions, shadows made to look like betrayal. He knew at once the noble had planned this carefully. Solara's gaze hardened as she studied the crystal. Her court waited, hungry for scandal. The noble pressed on, his voice louder now. Your Highness, this creature hides behind false loyalty. He deceives you, he poisons your throne if he is not punished. Your rule itself may be shamed. The courtiers cried out in agreement, shame. Some shouted, remove him. Others demanded. The hall filled with noise, a storm of voices rising against Daniel. But Daniel did not bow his head. He did not beg or cry out. Instead, he stood tall, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on Solara's. I have done no dishonor, he said simply, his voice steady. I have served with my hands, with my courage, with my truth. Nothing more, the noble laughed cruelly. Listen to him. Such arrogance, such lies. A beast that pretends to be noble. Shall we allow this in our court? The hall roared again, but Solara lifted her hand, and silence fell like a blade. Her eyes glowed with dangerous light. Enough, she said, her voice low but heavy with power. She turned her gaze on Daniel. The weight of her eyes pressed against him like fire. For a moment, he wondered if she would cast him aside to please the court. His heart pounded, but he did not move. He would not crawl, not even now. Solara stepped down from her throne, her gown trailing silver light. She walked slowly toward Daniel, the hall holding its breath. The noble's lips curled into a smile of victory. He thought he had won. Solara stopped in front of Daniel. Her eyes searched his face, his wounds, his silence. Then she turned sharply, her voice rising like thunder. You dare accuse without proof, she said to the noble. You dare bring lies into my hall? The noble froze, his face pale. My princess. The crystal, but Solara cut him off with a raised hand. Crystals can be shaped, shadows can be twisted. But courage cannot be faked. I have seen this human's courage with my own eyes. The court gasped. Shocked at her defense, the noble tried again, his voice desperate. He is dangerous, he seeks your favor. Solara's eyes burned like fire as she shouted, silence. Her voice shook the hall, the floating lanterns flickering under her command. You speak of danger? Yet it was this human who faced the beast when my own guards failed. It was this human who brought harmony when others laughed. It is you, noble, who bring shame with lies and envy. The hall fell silent. Every courtier frozen, the noble trembled. His proud mask shattered. Solara's hand lifted, and guards stepped forward. Take his title, she commanded. Her voice cold. Let him be stripped of honor. Let the court remember. Jealousy is the true poison. The guards seized the noble, dragging him away as he cried out in rage. The courtiers lowered their heads, whispering in fear. None dared speak against the princess now. Solara turned back to Daniel. For a moment her eyes softened, though her voice remained firm. You stood in silence when accused. That silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. Daniel bowed slightly, his heart heavy yet steady. I only stood as I am, he said quietly. The princess studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back to her throne. But before she sat, she looked once more at him, her voice low enough for only him to hear. You are no longer just a servant, Daniel. Remember that, hook ending. The noble was gone, but his hatred was not broken. Somewhere in the shadows, his whispers would rise again, and Daniel realized that surviving one betrayal did not mean safety. It only meant the next strike would come sharper and more dangerous than before. The throne hall was still heavy with silence after the rival noble's downfall. But silence in a palace was never peace. Whispers spread like fire behind crystal walls. Some nobles bowed deeper to Solara, others hid their anger. And all eyes turned again and again to the strange human who now stood at her side. Daniel felt the weight of their stares. He had survived beasts, tests, and false accusations, but he knew the court would never forgive him for being more than they wished him to be. He was meant to fail, yet each trial only bound him closer to the princess, and closer to danger. The days after the betrayal were tense. Solara called Daniel to her chambers often. Sometimes for lessons, sometimes for talks. She asked him more about Earth, its storms, its oceans, the way humans built homes with hands instead of machines. He spoke honestly, and she listened with quiet hunger. But the more she listened, the more her courtiers whispered. "The princess grows too close," they murmured. "Is she forgetting the honor of her blood?" The tension reached its peak during the Festival of Moons. It was the grandest event of the Empire, a night when nobles from every world gathered. The hall was filled with light from twin moons. Lanterns floated like stars, music thundered like waves. Solara stood tall at the center, her gown glowing brighter than the moons themselves. At her side stood Daniel, a plain figure in simple robes. The courtiers looked at him with disbelief. How could a human stand so near to their princess? The rival noble, stripped of title but still alive, appeared at the edge of the hall, his eyes burning with secret hatred. His whispers had spread poison in every ear. And now the court demanded judgment. One noble stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Princess," he said, his voice sharp, "we honor you. But we question this human's place at your side. He is not of our kind. He is not worthy of your trust," others followed, voices rising in agreement. "Send him away," they demanded. "End this insult." The hall grew loud with shouts. Daniel stood still, silent as before. He would not beg. He would not defend himself. He had given his courage and his truth. Now the choice was not his, it was hers. Solara raised her hand and silence fell. Her silver eyes swept across the hall. "Cold and sharp, you demand my choice?" she said, her voice calm but heavy. "Then you shall have it." She stepped down from her throne. The hall watching with frozen breath, she walked to Daniel, standing before him with eyes that seemed to pierce his soul. "You fought when others fled," she said softly, her voice carrying to every corner. "You sang when others mocked. You stood in silence when lies were cast against you. Tell me, is this not honor?" No one spoke, the hall waiting. Solara lifted her chin, her voice ringing like thunder. "This human has pleased me more than all of you with your polished words and hollow bows." Her eyes blazed with light. "He is no longer just a servant, he is protector, he is witness. He is proof that worth is not in blood, but in courage." Gasps filled the chamber. Some nobles bowed quickly. Others stared in fury. Daniel's chest tightened as her words struck like fire. He had not expected such defense, not before the entire empire. The rival noble stepped forward, desperate. "You cannot raise a human above us," he cried. But Solara's gaze turned on him like a blade. "You are already beneath him," she said coldly. "Take him away," she ordered. And guards dragged the noble out screaming. The hall was hers again. Solara turned back to Daniel. He bowed slightly, his heart heavy with awe and confusion. "You honor me," he whispered, but Solara shook her head, her voice soft. "No, Daniel, you honor yourself. I only see it." The music began again, slowly at first, then rising. The court had no choice but to follow the princess's command. Daniel stood at her side, no longer just a prisoner. He was now a name whispered with both fear and wonder. As the night ended, Solara leaned close, her voice for him alone. "You have pleased me more than anyone in this galaxy," she said quietly. "But know this, your lessons are not over. Your place beside me will bring both power and danger. The court will never forget tonight, nor will I." Daniel's heart pounded. He had begun as a prisoner, then a servant, then a fighter. Now he stood as something else entirely. But he knew the path ahead would not be easy. The alien princess had chosen him, but in that choice the galaxy itself had changed. Final hook ending. The human had learned to please the alien princess, but in pleasing her he had altered the balance of an empire. And as the moons faded into dawn, Daniel realized his story was not ending. It was only the beginning of something far greater.